Adam Post, publisher of College of the Dead, at Comics We Love. But who do I have with me tonight? My old friend. I've known him since before we both launched our campaigns. We got together in Comicsgate, buddies forever. Clint Stoker, a.k.a. SWEETCAST, baby. How are you, Clint?
I am doing great. Great to see you.
Fantastic.
Now I can hear an echo now that we're live for some reason.
All right. Hey.
I don't know what that is, but yeah.
I was just on mail. Oh, I got backup plans for this, okay? It's headset time.
Oh, there we go.
It's headset time. Here we go.
It's funny how that happens. You go live, and that's when, yeah, it sounds good now.
Now I'm good. There's no echo.
All right. Yeah.
Ever since I went on John Malin, echo. And it's been at least 2 hours now since I went on Malin earlier. It was fantastic. Yeah. Malin's a great host. A lot of fun. But yeah, thanks for the heads up on that. And Jack, thanks for moderating and keeping on top of things. And Clint, you know, there's a lot of stuff we could talk about. I could just talk about a whole bunch of different things with you. But the reason I wanted to talk to you tonight was to go over a common topic because, you know, people know you as SWEETCAST now. You have a big following. Your campaign was definitely a nice, solid success for DOWNCAST. But I know you learned a lot from launching your first campaign.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it's really helpful to people. I really like to do as much as I can to think about a topic that is entertaining, but it's also like educational and really useful for people who are thinking about launching campaigns too. If there's like one thing I can pass along that someone's going to really benefit from it, I love to give the information out. You've always been generous with advice and with feedback too, to me. So it's cool that we can do that for other people too.
Yeah, I think it's helpful. It's one of those things like, I don't know, this is something I like about Comicsgate is that there's this culture of just sharing information where you might not have that other places. You know what I mean? People keep it their best kept secret. But I've had so much help from so many people that I just feel like, you know, I got to just spread it around. So
it's amazing too, isn't it, Clint, how people, if they see you like struggling a little bit, they find a polite way to say to you like, hey, you know what you might want to think about is such and such. But people aren't really, except for me, maybe with you a little bit with one aspect of production management. Yeah. But sometimes like, you know, people just want to help each other and then we all get better faster.
Yeah. Well, and I've got an example you bring up. You talked to me a little bit. It was before. I think it was before I launched the campaign. You said you ought to consider because so everyone knows my campaign when I launched it. It was just me and Ignacio Lazaro, and he was going to be doing the line art and the colors. And you know, I thought, well, that's a nice way we can save money. But so you talked to me and said, hey, you might want to consider getting a colorist on because that's a lot of work and it's going to, you know, slow down your production time and all that. And so, you know, we got started on the project and I thought about it and I was like, Adam's right. So we got Damien on board to do the colors. And that's one thing that I'm really, really glad that I did right from the get-go because things happen, you know, production schedules can slow down. And right now we're way far ahead of schedule. So it's actually been it's the difference between launching another campaign this year versus having to wait till next year. And so it's a massive difference. So I do appreciate that advice. And I took it because it was great advice.
Yeah, I'm glad. And of course, you're welcome to it. Anything else that I happen to know, having put projects and comics projects together over the years, I've noticed that like, the big enemy is the unknown. And, you know, back in the day, we would hire separate pencilers and inkers. For the most part with independents, you tend to hire the same penciler and inker so that they can kind of build their rate up a little bit and you're not sending the work all over creation. And to be able to color is another great talent. But at the same time, the reason why I suggested the color was, you know, if the artist who's doing your pencils and inks can only do a certain amount of work a week, which is typical. They have multiple other projects. You want them to do their best work. So they may only be able to do 3 pages a week of pencils and inks and give you really solid work. If you throw colors on top of that, it could be maybe a page and a half a week or 2 pages a week, or sometimes it's just the work is so daunting to the talent, and you have to think about how the talent thinks too, that they just can't find the time to do 2 pages that week. So sometimes they just do nothing. And it's not because they don't want to do the work, or they don't want to be on time, or they don't love and care about the project. It's just life gets in the way too much. So you kind of split your bets a little bit like that. And it's great however you handled the relationship, that your artist wasn't offended either, and they understood it was just about letting them do their best work. But there's a heck of a lot of little tricks like that. I'm sure more that you picked up along the way, like when you start the lettering, and other feedback with the rest of the team. So what would you say? This is what I wanted to, I the first show that I was on, actually talking about College of the Dead on any YouTube channel at all, was the first show with you when we met your editor, who seems like a great guy.
Oh yeah, Brandon. Yeah.
Brandon. So my first question to you really specifically was, what do you feel like you learned about the writing process of comics, if anything, having done your first project now?
Yeah, a big thing for me was figuring out how the format, and I actually made a video. I posted a video today about it. But
awesome,
doing 48 pages, I ended up doing 52 pages of story for Downcast. It's kind of an awkward length for a story, or it's just not something that we're used to. So I've written a lot of 24-page scripts, and then really short ones like 8-pagers. And then everything else, it's like, oh, I have this idea for a 6-issue story arc. But with crowdfunding, it doesn't really lend itself to doing a 6-issue story arc in one go. And so getting the 48 to 60 pages and making that epic enough that people are going to love it, but at the same time, making it manageable enough. A lot of this is just in the writing process and planning it out. So I was really, really glad that I hired an editor, Brandon, because I thought, and I was worried about pacing problems with the story, just because of the length of the story. And he really helped me. Like, there was this certain little thing I wanted to do in it, and it just didn't make sense. It was way too rushed. So I cut it out, and we're going to do kind of a version like that in the next book. And that way you still get to have, everything we want, but without the, breakneck pace in order to get through it. So
yeah, it's difficult to describe. And it's funny because I was talking about writing on the show I was on previously, and I love to bring up Professor Geek's channel. I don't know if you know Professor Geek.
Yeah.
He's a nice guy. He's a professional teacher, and he is a professor. He has written and taught on how to write comics and how to write graphic novels. He's written on archetypes, and archetypes are like basic models. Like the Joker as a character is a villain trickster, but a trickster is a classic character that it's throughout literature. So that's why I like to reference Professor Geek, because for me, I feel like it helps me to think as a writer, 10 times better in half the speed. I'm like, all right, I want a trickster for this, and I want a hero for this, and a reluctant hero for that. And you can kind of put a lot together very quickly. But the pacing of a 48 pager is, it's not short, and it's not super duper long. So you have to introduce, I guess, and develop a lot of stuff like right away. So you really feel like your editor is great. He really has a great understanding story. Do you recall his website name in case anybody's looking for an editor?
I think it was affordableeditors.com. I have his email address, so we just email.
You could always hit Clint up or hit me up if you want to on Twitter. We'll make sure you can find it. And Clint, your Twitter is at Cast Suite, right?
Yeah, at Cast Suite.
CAST Suite.
Yep.
If in case you have any questions, of course, too, Clint is really friendly on Twitter. So you feel like you've nailed that 48-page format, and you feel good about it?
The readers will determine that. I feel a lot better about it since I hired an editor, and since I gave myself, initially I was saying this story is going to be completely wrapped up within 52 pages, and it's going to be finished. But because of the response from the first one, and I feel like there's more story there, so I just kind of, it does resolve it resolves to a point, but it also kind of leads you into wanting to read the next addition to the story. So that kind of freed things up. So yeah, readers are going to have to let me know what they think. I worked really hard on it. I mean, I'm pretty excited for everyone to read it. I think it's pretty good, but just like everything, you put it out there and you got to hear what readers feedback is. So
hey, that's what Comicsgate is about, is taking the feedback.
Yep.
But what I will say is, you have a very capable editor, having met him and talked to him myself, and your Downcast is good. It's going to be good because it's going to be a good story, and you can see the execution of the art is good. And did your editor also give you feedback on the art as well? Did he get to see the art?
So that's going to be a second pass. So after we're the way that we're doing it, and you'll have to let me know what you think. But we did a story pass on the script, and we went back and forth, and I made revisions. I think it was 4 or 5 revisions with him, and then got the art going. So then the part of the deal is we're going to finish the art, get it lettered, and then he's going to read it again, and I'm going to read it again, and go over the dialogue. And if there's anything that's confusing art wise, then Nacho can take it back and correct some panels, or we do whatever we need to do to make sure it's clear and makes sense. So part of that is just I've been looking at every single page as they come in. I just got 2 new pages today, actually.
Congratulations!
And, yeah, it always feels good every time.
It feels amazing. It does.
Yeah, so I've been I have one Photoshop document open, and I take all the pages and put it into that same document, like thumbnail size, and just so I can see the flow of the story.
From page to page.
So it's been, man, the whole process has been a great learning process. I've just never done a project this big in comics. Everything's been little pitches, 8 pages. So,
and you're working with like a crew. There's you, there's your editor, there's the penciler and inker, there's the colorist. Yeah. Are you lettering yet?
No, Eric Weathers is lettering it.
Okay. But I mean, has he started giving you back lettered pages yet?
Not yet. He prefers to letter it all at once. So we're trying that out. He told me he could do it in 2 or 3 days.
He's very fast. He's very capable. And I can see where, in terms of design, it makes more sense for him to do that. At the same time, if it's really meaningful to you, and it might be, the first 5 pages, if he would letter those, it would help you out a lot, even if you have to pay him twice.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you wouldn't have to. He's a very reasonable guy. But the thing of it is if you've never seen letters on your work before, it's a delayed gratification that you've earned by now. So you need a favor, you ask for it. But yeah, I can certainly see where if he was sitting down with all those pages in front of him, he'd get through it, and it would be very cool and smooth for him. But it would just mean so much. Just give you an example. I just actually got this today. This is the prototype for College of the Dead, color printed, 140 pages.
Wow.
And yeah, I mean, I had a black and white prototype before Kyle colored it. Which one is cooler? The black. The color is cooler.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
It's color. Thanks, man. Oh my God, I'm so excited, and I'll show you too because we're on it. This is the older prototype, but this is the making of. So this is the script on one side and the pencil layout on the other from Javier.
Oh, cool.
And it really shows people how we put the comics together, or how we put this book together. And seeing this stuff, and I'm sure you see layouts. I hope you do. I hope you see layouts. Okay. So but no one else gets to see that stuff. It's really cool. And there is a joy to putting these things together and just making these projects. And it's just good to be able to enjoy it like at every step. And if you can share it through, I don't know if you're doing any, Ashcan version or working of or making of piece or whatever it is, or maybe you put an extra 8 pages in the back or something. It's very cool for people to just get that further engagement to see what you're doing. This is going like to an extreme, but this is the art book version of what we did, where because the panels were all equal sized, we made this 8.5 by 8.5 extra book.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So this is it's another 260-page book.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's like,
Cool.
yeah, man. Like you can do so much, and the formats are unique formats for me. So I'd never done any formats like that before, exactly of any of it. But we just kind of made the mock-ups to see what they would look like, and they looked really cool. I was like, all right, as long as it looks cool, it's good.
Yeah.
So
That's something I didn't do, but I'm considering for the next one, doing for Downcast 2, doing a making of, and we could have stuff from both books, and that, I don't know, it'd be cool, I think.
oh, people would love it, and of course they don't have to buy it. Like on my campaign, it's all right. Can I do this the right way? This is like high tech stuff. Share screen. Let me just show you the. Oh, this is on Downcast. Okay, cool. So this is Downcast. You might have seen this page before.
Yeah. It's familiar.
I'm focusing on Downcast at the moment. On
Yeah.
College of the Dead. Okay, so we have this tier where it's the comic book and the ash can, and for $50 you get the 140-page book, which obviously is done, and you get the 100-page ash can, which has all the script of the text and the layout. And then we have the set at the bottom here of that's 5 everything of all 3 books of, and that's the only way to get the art book as part of the set, which is the comic and the ash can and the art book. And again, it was experimental, but that's another great thing about crowdfunding is you can just kind of try stuff. As long as you're passionate about it, people become curious about it.
Yeah.
And this is, of course, the horrific cover to College of the Dead book 2, which is also like 99% done. We'll get more serious about promoting that book once people have the books in their hands.
Yeah.
October of 2019, before Halloween.
Nice.
But Downcast is such a great success, and a lot of people are excited for you, man. I remember when you put this image up, that was fire underneath your campaign.
Oh, yeah.
Is that another thing that you learned?
Yeah. That print right there, part of me thinks like, man, I wish so it was kind of it was a last thought. Okay. It was the last addition to the campaign. I thought I need something to sweeten the deal for people on the mailing list and something to kind of just offer to people that are willing to pay more for the higher tiers. So I have this friend, Chaz Wagamont, he's a professional artist. He doesn't work in comics. But he does a lot of really high profile animation stuff and illustration stuff for like Disney. Even his company gets contracted to do stuff with them. And so I asked him, hey, can you help me out? I just want to do a 9x6 print that looks gorgeous. And so he's like, well, what do you want? And I was like, I don't, just here's the character. Show me what you got. And so this is what he turned in. And I'm like, wow. So yeah, it's gorgeous. I had it as a limited print. So there's only 350 of them total. I had 95 of those that were reserved for people on the mailing list. Those completely sold out in, I think, day 3 of the campaign. They were all gone. And then, there's still a few available now in the print bundle, I think it's called. But we also had a $50 tier that had 2 of each cover and this print, and that sold out too. And
but
so
what you have with this is you have an exciting, compelling key image.
Yeah.
A key image associated with your campaign that really grabs people. There's action in this image with this guy getting thrown through the glass.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. But it's not a drop your coffee cup kind of image as much as like this is.
Right.
But as you said, this guy Chaz is like, he's a next level talent.
Oh yeah.
So having that kind of key art's a big deal. With College of the Dead, we had, this colored piece by Kyle, and it is a compelling piece. And this was added later. This additional blood in the background was added by this really great guy from the Deltaverse group, Alejandro. You know him.
Oh yeah.
Actually, Vaughn I had asked Vaughn Klaus, who's a great guy from Monster MD, how do I dress up my campaign? What do you think, Vaughn? And Vaun gave me this. I hardly knew the guy at the point, but I was just like, he seems so cool. Let me just ask him.
Yeah.
And he took his time. And that's the thing you find out in Comicsgate too, guys. I learned so much of that. I'm sure you learned even more of that too, Clint, is that people will bend over backwards if they see you're sincere and you're just trying to do like a good comic. People go out of their way to help you with advice. So Vaughn wrote up a really fantastic write-up. He gave me like 5 paragraphs of to do this, do this, do this, do this. He was so cool. But he also was like, listen, you got to dress up your listings a little bit because, this gray background with I would never do it again. Like my vaporware is great. You can see my books look almost real.
Yeah.
But that's not even a question. Your art, look, is this real? Like, well, it's just beautiful art. Is it a cover? Is it a print? It doesn't matter. It's compelling. I want to buy what you're selling.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that like you have a 3D image that looks almost exactly like a book, that's not a big deal. The fact that you have a cool image that's offset and it's like a blood splatter in the background. Alejandro from the Deltaverse group did that for me. That is a big deal. That matters.
Mm-hmm.
That helped us. And then I had been waiting like weeks and weeks. I didn't want to show the image to the College of the Dead 2 cover. I was like, well, it actually is a pretty damn good image. And then I showed it, and it created a lot of excitement about the campaign. It also let people know that, you know what, you can invest in the first book because I'm going to be doing another book. And that was helpful. Ethan retweeted it. Ethan Van Sciver retweeted it saying outstanding at the top. He really liked the reference. He's like, this is a very good reference. It's almost too good. And he's like,
Yeah.
just stop talking about it right there.
it says a little bit more,
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
this poor somebody had to die to make this cover, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But not literally, but yes, literally, but not because we didn't kill anybody to make the cover.
It's also social commentary too. You're passing kids through college and they come out zombies.
Yeah, well, I've had a couple of teachers tell me that. That like that as a teacher, I can tell you this is seen this sort of thing before.
Yeah.
So yeah, well, it is. It's like the social justice warrior thing almost. It's like they got their degree, but a little bit hollow. So I wanted to ask you what you've learned also about like dealing with artists. You dealt with Chaz. You're now dealing with Eric as an artist, as a letterer for sure, Nacho, and your colorist. And this is, I think, new for you to be working with artists.
Yeah. Well, and then there's also Matthew Weldon.
Matt Weldon.
Matt Weldon, and then the colorist on that cover, Derek Dow. So I had worked with some artists on small projects. They were just submissions for image, but it was very very loose, and so working with artists, the biggest thing that I realized about myself that's a problem, at which I am correcting, is I want to be a nice guy, and sometimes that means I'm sacrificing what I need. And so I've been learning that and getting a lot better at it. And it comes down to putting a deadline that I need. Like this project has to be done at this time. Can you do this? As opposed to working with the artist and coming up with a deadline together. That's been one of the biggest things that I've learned. The other thing too is like,
let me interrupt you for a second.
Go ahead.
Because I want to eat this up a little bit. And I'll tell you what, I was a really nice guy, but I wasn't. I was just telling it the way it was to this guy, Render Contender, who was an artist on a book called Outlaw Nights, and he also drew for John on the New Graveyard Shift. And I'll tell you what my version of nice is. But tell me what your version is. I love this communication. I love like the literal explicit communication of let's pull a word apart. So when you were saying I wanted to be a nice guy, and then I'll tell you what Render said about that, because he was just talking about that. When you're saying you wanted to be a nice guy, that meant doing what and not doing what?
Yeah, so I would say in this case it was trying to be really accommodating, and like, oh, this is your schedule, let's work around your schedule.
Okay.
And so like trying to make them feel comfortable and like they've got room to be creative, all these kinds of things, because I've just heard so many horror stories from artists. But I see from the other side of things that they're just people too, and
it is amazing what they do. I mean, they turn nothing into just imagination into reality. So it's like, well, that's pretty amazing. So you want to respect that. They're gifted. They're deeply gifted. So in talking with this guy, I don't know what his real name is, but he goes by Render Contender. We were just talking, and I was acknowledging, I could see the man is very disciplined, and he knows what work he needs to do. He's very serious about his reference. He really appreciates clear communication about what somebody wants, because if we hire an artist to do something, especially because we are not, well, you are an artist. I've seen some of your work, but we're not,
A little bit.
we wouldn't hire each other to do books or anything like that.
No. Yeah.
But so we're not a working artist or anything like that. But they need that clear communication, because like this guy Render, he's a hardworking guy. He puts like 9-10 hours into a page for a pencil and ink page. He wants to know, like, what do you think is a good job? Not just feedback on the back end. He needs that, but on the front end, and if you want him to work through the weekend to make a deadline, he'll do it. And they're happy to do it for you, and they'll sacrifice their time and they'll juggle things around, but they sincerely want to know, why is it necessary and is it important? So it's that really telling people honestly, what it is that you want, what it is that you need, why it's important, and also looking at people's prior work to understand what are they capable of doing, and are you being ridiculous with these requests? So when you ask an artist, and John was doing this with John Malin with Render before, how many page, how long did it take you to do that page? Well, this one took me 9 hours, but that one, Render was like, well, that one took 14 hours to do that cover, and it obviously had a lot more work on it. So you don't ask him to give you a page or 3 pages, in 2 days, unless it's absolutely necessary, because the work would suffer, the guy wouldn't sleep, you disrupt his whole life. But if you start to ask people questions about like what pace they work at, what style they're comfortable with, what do they really like to work on, you kind of start to understand, hey, do we have a fit here where what I'm looking for, is this something that somebody is used to doing and comfortable with doing? And then if you're asking them to do something that's within their lane and something that's within like muscle memory for them, it's so much easier for them to deliver for you. And then you could also let them know, like, well, hey, because you've done science fiction stuff before, this is pretty similar to that. The only difference is some of my characters do kind of have a lot of tattoos, or whatever it might be. That's a variation on what it is that they do.
Mm-hmm.
So that even though, and sometimes like when you think they know, it's like, if you're sure, that you want to make sure they know, right? And you want to make sure that they know that that they know. We're going kind of back and forth, but just that you have that mutual understanding. And when they deserve a bonus, if you have the money, give them the bonus. If you don't have the money, you thank them, and say, listen, I have to give you a bonus next time. I just don't have the money on this one, but you really killed it on this one. If that happens to be what the situation is, just that kind of like we're on the same side of the table, but also it's almost like with friends, like you're not being a friend to someone if you don't tell them straight. You're not being nice to someone by not telling them straight. It's like you're being weak, and you're the one who's pulling this whole project together. So yeah, we owe it to the talent to be straight with them. And also, if it's like a one, like for example, just like that thing we were talking about with Eric, like you're such a, you convey a very professional air, Clint, because you're such a respectful guy.
I try to.
So it's a little surprising that you've never made comics before. So
not published.
Not really. Not for realsies.
Not really. Not until DOWNCAST.
Now you're doing it for realsies, and you have a successful campaign. So somebody like Eric is a good example. He sees you as a peer, and you've earned that. But he's worked with all the biggest and the best guys now, So it's sort of like, are you really a peer with him? Like, yeah, you are a peer, but you've never seen like DOWNCAST letter before, even the first few pages.
Well, so, he did do the first 5 pages.
He did.
Yeah, we put those on the campaign. They're not there anymore just because I switched it out for some fresh art. But yeah, I have seen the first 5 pages.
Feels amazing, right?
Yeah, they look great.
Very cool.
So yeah, it's really cool to see it finished.
So let me ask you about just scheduling work in general.
Yeah.
And that may not be exciting for people, but for people that put comics together, it's really important, and it can drive people crazy.
Yeah.
So you're ahead of schedule, which is actually like miraculous.
Yeah.
I'm sure breaking up the color helped, but Nacho has had. Now you post, and forgive me for not remembering, but I think you're 75% done of your pencils and inks.
70% done right now, and the colors are not far behind. So we're actually
Don't you love that? Isn't that fantastic?
The goal right now is to be done by October 1st, with the art, total colors, line art, and then there's going to be a little bit of process there to get it lettered and edited and make sure it's ready to go and printed. But yeah, this is great. The timing has been phenomenal.
So when you're scheduling work, have you guys set like a certain number of pages per week, and then you're just kind of knocking them down as you go? Like, okay, we got this number of pages per week. That's what we expected.
Yeah. So rather than going with weekly page rates or page numbers, we've gone with monthly. I was a little bit nervous with that, but
It should be.
It's
quite risky.
Yeah, but it's been working well because I'm still getting pages every. It's not like I get just all the pages at the end of the month.
Mm-hmm.
They've been coming every week. I'm not sure that necessarily that would work with everybody, but just with Ignacio, we've got a flow that works pretty well for us, I guess.
This and by the way, I hope that maybe you learned this in this process is like, all right, this the workflow is part of the artist agreeing to work with the publisher.
Yeah.
So this is something that we should not be fixing after we started. Like this is something to do and to plan out in advance so that the artist could look at his life and look at his other upcoming commitments. You may have someone who does commissions for fans, and those commissions he does 4 days a week and he gets paid well for it. And he might want to work 2 days a week on our comics. And he's not making as much maybe on our comics because some of the original commission pieces might be $200 or $300 a piece, or who knows what the heck is going on. But you gotta, you help when you come up with that workflow in advance. The artist gets to kind of think through, as you do, like, all right, well, what kind of an imposition on this person's lifestyle and their work commitments is it going to be to deliver for you?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So the workflow that you guys eventually got into, this is something that you would establish in advance next time out, right?
Yeah, and so this is another tricky thing is that you get artists that'll say, "Hey, I want to do your project, but I'm on this other book," and that was the same thing that I had with Nacho. And he's a published artist, and he's got a book that he's doing in Argentina, and it's like, I was like, okay, if you say you can do it. In hindsight,
however,
I love Nacho. I really, really like his artwork. It's so unique. But part of me, like, what I'd rather do is just say, hey, I want you on this project, and you know what? It'll make us both a lot more money if this is your project. And like for example,
yeah. You wanted to you're saying next time around, maybe I would sell this guy rather than work around his wacky Argentina comic. No, that's my characterization, not yours. Just having fun.
Well, yeah, and it'd be like, for example, now I have a proven track record, and he knows that too. And so he's off of the second book, and so pages have been moving quickly, and they're beautiful too. So it's been great. But part of me thinks, if you were doing Downcast, we could, in theory, with this creative team, we could put out a monthly book. We wouldn't, but we could. And
or a quarterly 48 pager.
Exactly.
Because there's buffer.
Yep.
There is a realistic format for publishing on Indiegogo.
Yep.
And there is, a steady, that's a business.
Yeah.
That's a business rather than just like one book a year.
Right. And I'd be happy to pay, with that kind of turnaround time, I would pay higher page rates. You know what I mean? And we worked it out, and he's definitely being rewarded, and we raised his page rate even with him leaving the colors behind, I was like, I don't want you to feel like you're getting, the short end of the stick here. So we worked it out, and
You're a
we're
fair
happy.
man.
I know. So that's another thing I'm learning too. I gotta watch out for me a little bit more.
Well, no. And actually, it's a little, the universe in Comicsgate is a little bit different, especially if you want a continuing relationship. So if you're publishing comics and you're shooting them out to comic book stores, it doesn't matter as much, that you're going to have an ongoing relationship with talent, even though it does matter and it's so useful to have the same talent on the same project. But like, for example, with Downcast, because Nacho could do a quarterly Downcast with you. You guys have a shorthand. You have a vibe working together.
Yeah.
That's a business. That's like owning a small apartment building. That's something where it's like, all right, between 4 books a year, you guys could average 30 to 50,000 a book in sales. Maybe some up, maybe some down. Who knows? You could plan some traditional original art pages as part of the whole package deal.
Yep.
Whatever the whole deal might be, but that's a steady business where you could essentially be like in business with Nacho, and it's just getting done, and you're not jumping around with other freelance teams and having to manage it. That's very manageable for you and very cool. And then you're a writer, you have other ideas, so you could then start a relationship with another artist, and so there's nothing wrong with it as long as when you're compensating people that they like they know why, and that it's not just like, again, well, it's because you're nice. It's like, well, no, it's because we're working together. We did better than we thought we might, although nearly exactly what Adam Post predicted before we launched. Shh, don't tell anybody. Hey, if I could have predicted higher numbers for me, but so far I'm very happy with what we've done, and you've earned it because you preloaded your channel and you work so hard, and you're nice. Everybody loves you. But in all seriousness, I mean, you hit a good number, so you would have worked it out with bonus probably anyway.
Yeah, and that's another thing is bonuses. That's a good idea. As incentive, I should say. That's something I like, is to say, like, I've heard of a lot of other people do it. I have not done this, but to say, hey, this would be great if, according to the pace we've been working, we should have a book done by this time. If you can turn in quality work sooner, you will get, a bonus of X amount. And I'd have to figure all that out. But
you're talking to the freelance talent.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, I thought what you were going to say was this. I thought you were going to say, because I've seen this in campaigns, and people like it. And Vaughn did this recently, Von Klaus for Monster MD, whose name seems to come up in every show I'm on. I always find a Vaughn reference because he's such a dynamic, new, out of the cannon kind of guy.
Oh, yeah.
Monster MD, don't forget to back it. Vaughn did like a bonus, and Kyle, we did even did it for Kyle Ritter too, where it's like, if you get over a certain amount of money, then you're going to give a bonus to the talent.
Right.
I don't know if Vaughn said exactly what the bonus amount was going to be, and I trust him in whatever the number was. But it was sort of like, if we hit this stretch goal, we can give it a bonus to the talent. That seems like very sensible and direct. With respect to the artist doing the work sooner and getting a bonus, don't do that. only because don't do that because you don't want them to rush. So you want to just you have to just be careful with the incentivizing them, because honestly, it is difficult to critique artists' work. Unless, like, I heard John Malin criticizing, not criticizing, but complimenting, and he did criticize one thing. There was like one piece of a body part missing off a character, something like that. So if you're an artist, it's much easier to look at other people's work and say, hey, the perspective is wrong here, or I don't like the art there. For us, it's a little more difficult. So we just have to kind of, Eskimo Phono is reminding us. Thank you, Eskimo Phono. Malin did the bonus as well. Extra money is always welcome. Yeah, it is. Yeah. And people like to see talent taken care of, and as right they should. Absolutely right they should. Yeah, there was a character that he didn't get his nipple drawn on, but he got his arm cut off. But I'm sure that's going to be fixed. And John says it's not how many it's like once is fine, but it's just you don't do it all the time or something like that.
Yeah.
But with artists, like, it depends. Look, there's an artist that you work with, for example, and one of the things that John Malin says is, well, what is their presence on social media? Are they out helping to promote a book? If they're out helping to promote a book and they have a significant following, he considers that like that's worth money to him. So you just have to kind of think through these kinds of issues of like, well, what is it that you want to try to, what are you incentivizing? If it's an artist who is like Alfredo Alfecci is just fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
He's doing Jawbreakers, and he's doing another project, Jawbreakers 2, and he's doing another project for Richard Meyer now, and I love that guy's work.
Oh, yeah. It's fantastic.
And I want to offer him work. I have a lot of stuff that is in the midst of like various stages, so I have to get more organized. But I see people whose work is just, it's so commercial that you just want to hire that guy and give them something to do. And it's like, well, that's good, but you got to go slow. But he's the kind of guy where if you and he worked on a project together and he could keep he's obviously busy with Richard, but you understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If he could do a quarterly, his work is going to sell. And he's starting to become more popular on Twitter, at least, although I haven't really seen him on YouTube yet. But so the relationship is important. You have to feel like, is this somebody that I could work with, say, for 5 years? Do I want to do 4 books a year? Maybe that's a good way to look at it. Do I want to do 4 books a year with this guy? What are my expectations for this guy? And if you can, you tell them 90% of what your expectations are. So at least they see how important they are, right? Let me ask you, have you gotten involved yet with preparing files for production?
No, not yet. Yeah, I like to send off to the printer. I got all the specs from the printer just so we're all on the same page. The whole creative team, when we know the coloring and what kind of standards they prefer. But yeah, I haven't done any pre-press work yet at all. So that's something like I am, I want it to be done right. So I'm just prepared to hire help.
Now you are straight great buddies with Peter Cimetti from Alterna Comics.
Yes.
Yeah. I like to think that he and I like each other too, but we only did one show together. It was so fun. It was great talking with Peter. But Peter is like, I think, the most incredible production editorial comics guy working today. And I'll bet he would have a lot of great suggestions about what format, what software you need to be careful about. Are you bleeding or are you not bleeding pages? When you're composing the pages, should they be going into an InDesign document? Let's get Peter to have a production. And so a lot of people might be boring, but we could probably have some fun with it. We should have a pre-production conversation with Peter if he's down with it. We'll have to message him and see if he'd be cool with that.
That's a good idea. It's been on my mind because I think I just want to make sure nothing's like looks pixely. I want it to be crisp and
if it happened to Richard Meyer on Jawbreakers, it can happen to you.
Right.
And the issue with Richard, he had a few issues. Some of them, but the issue with the files was there were source files that came from different sources. So it's as if you had like 3 different creative teams with 3 different sets of files.
Yeah.
And at the end of it, somebody had to know how to go in and compose all of those things properly. I would not know that. I would have made at least probably the same mistake, if not worse, than what Richard did, because I have dealt with color, but it gets very complicated. The only person I would trust the most is His Holiness Saint Peter.
Yeah.
Peter Cimetti. Even this book, College of the Dead, I have 1 or 2 unresolved issues about these files. These prototypes are good. They're good to go. All the artwork is done, but there are some issues with respect to bleeds and InDesign and a couple of details. And I have someone who's helping me with it, and he's an expert. He actually is this guy, Mark Mazzi, worked with Ethan at Harris Comics and designed the Cyberfrog logo. So he's fantastic, but it can be very time consuming. And it's not just your designer. It's also what the printer wants to mess with.
Right.
And Peter knows your printer too. So we got to have a conversation with Peter on this one.
Yeah.
Maybe on the SWEETCAST channel or whatever channel you want to be on.
No, it's a good topic. And it's something I didn't really think a ton about. It's like, oh, I'll get to there when I get to it, but it's coming up for me. And so realizing,
it can slow you down,
yeah,
and you can at least make sure, because if your printer sounds like, I know they also were referred by Peter, API Productions.
yeah,
They seem like great people. But just to have a couple conversations with them, like, what final file do you want from me? Do you need, what specifications do you need exactly? What
mhm,
software should I be using? And
yeah,
even Peter has all the answers to that already.
right,
So just good for I'll tell you what, it's good for the Comicsgate world for us to have those conversations and figure it out. And
yeah,
sometimes you realize that the way you did setup was wrong. So okay, you just have to kind of break it down, do it right the second time, like not Peter, but Richard did with the Jawbreakers reprint, and I heard nothing but good things about the Jawbreakers reprint.
mhm. Yeah. It's one of those things. I didn't bother getting the reprint. I trusted it was okay. I've got the original, but
I didn't get the reprint either, but we
yeah,
would have heard
yeah,
something.
yeah,
Somebody
and
would have been on Twitter with like, "Hey, this doesn't look right" or whatever.
right. And he wanted to make sure that it was perfect. So yeah, like I'm sure it is. But
I don't doubt for a
yeah,
second.
yeah, it's one of those things that I don't know. This is where I feel like it is definitely my responsibility, because it's not just I'm not just a
You're
writer.
sending.
Yeah,
What do you mean? Of course,
I'm
it's not
yeah,
my responsibility. It's not,
no,
and it's not the printer's responsibility either.
yeah, yeah,
Their
yeah,
job is, I mean, they will look in a fatherly way. They will
yeah,
look at the work and they want to make sure it's good. But it is a garbage in, garbage out business,
right,
especially putting ink on paper. You're putting ink on paper. The pre-press has to be 100% perfect, and you don't want to be doing it as a last minute thing.
right.
Particularly, your artwork's done October 1st, so you honestly you need a schedule of when are your files going to be
Right.
composed. And if
Yeah.
even though it might only take 2 days for Eric to letter, um, if everything works perfectly, just the same, it might
Right.
be 2 weeks before you give it to the printer, and
Yeah.
they everyone has to schedule stuff. I don't know what their typical turnaround time is at a printer. It could be anywhere from a day, which it won't be because it's not digital. So it'll be anywhere from a day to a week to 3 weeks. And guess what's in November? And we do not want your book shipping um, after Thanksgiving.
No.
We want your book
No.
to ship latest the first week in November, right?
Right.
Latest, but
Yeah.
ideally the last week of
Mhm.
October.
And this is why, like, all of this, the scheduling stuff, this is the biggest thing I learned, is that I should have deadlines for everything, including myself. You know what I mean? Like, and talking to Brandon and saying, hey, the artwork should be done on October 1st. Can you be available to edit? Well, then the lettering's happening. That's going to take 3 days, we'll say. And then I need you
Hey,
available
by the
the
way,
next, the
it may
next day.
only take, if it takes 3 days to do your lettering and there are no corrections,
Yeah.
which we already stipulated, you've had 5 passes so far on this work. There's
Yeah.
probably going to be at least like a couple of corrections. But
Yeah.
even if there was 0 corrections, if it takes 3 days to do, are those going to be 3 days that literally Eric has nothing to do? I mean, he knows it's important, so he will
Right.
prioritize and rush like a maniac to get it done or whatever. But he
Yeah.
also may have, 2 other deadlines he has to manage. So 3 days with edits is really 6 days from day one.
Yeah.
So you gotta,
It's true.
you know what? One of the things, the great thing about getting organized with this kind of spreadsheets and stuff like that is once you make the template, you're going to reuse it for the next 100 books that you do with
Yeah.
very minor modifications.
Yeah.
And the thing is, you don't have to think about it and you don't have to worry. Hey, Peter Cimetti, we were just talking about you. I wonder if he wants, we're talking about pre-press. Peter, we're talking about pre-press. Do you want to give us a little schooling about what we need to know and save a few lives here? Because already I got pre-press issues. We're working them out, but
Yeah. You got to have it right. Yeah.
yeah, you do, or it affects the work. Or the thing is, you want to respect the printer as much as you want to respect the artist. They're artists too, man. They really are. So you
Yeah.
don't want to you want to make it easy for your printer to do a really good job. You don't want to make them have to jump through hoops to do a good job. Where is Samedi?
He says measure twice, cut once. That's
Yeah,
good advice.
you know what? All of that good old lady advice.
Yeah.
But it's true. It's true. Hold on.
Yeah.
I'm going to send him a link. Peter, if you want to come in, you're going to come in and you're going to say like measure twice, cut once, whatever those kinds of things are, because it makes a huge difference to I'm going to include myself, us guys putting books together, just to even at least like yell at us, threaten us, and say, listen, you need to know your software. Here's the programs. You don't have to work the programs, but you need to know what the programs are.
Right.
You need to talk about it with your printer. I want Peter to be mean to us a little bit, a little
Yeah.
tough with us.
Whip us and
be like, why don't you guys know this already?
Yeah. Well, see, this
Peter.
is again one of those things. Like, you're not just a comic book writer. That's how I picture myself. I'm publishing this thing, a project manager, and so it has been really helpful to me that I've watched a whole bunch of videos on how to color comics. Not
Awesome.
because I'm a great comic colorist, but because I have a better understanding of how to pick a good colorist that knows what they're doing. Same thing with drawing.
By the way, just to interrupt what you just said.
Yeah,
that's an excellent suggestion, and I'm going to take you up on it. I haven't done that. That's a great thing to have learned putting out your first comics is understand what's going on in the coloring, like what the part of it is, what part of it is storytelling, what part of it is mood.
I can't tell you how helpful that has been when reviewing portfolios for colorists. It's so much easier to pick a colorist that has some good understanding because you can already weed out. For me, it's like, did they color everything in local light? Then that means it's not good enough, And so, things like that. The best YouTube channel for coloring. I totally blanked his name now. Let me think. I'm gonna look this up real quick.
Yeah, look it up. Take a minute. It's well worth the time.
I don't know why I'm forgetting his name. I've seen a ton of his videos. It's Kurt and Color with Kurt. Oh, he changed the name of his channel. Color with Kurt. That's where you want to go. He's a
K-U-R-T?
K-U-R-T. And he does basically he's done coloring for Image Comics and a lot of Image books, but he's a professional colorist. He does different styles. He does all these tutorials and he gives you explanations. And so it's nice if you want to learn how to color. But for me, it's been invaluable just to be able to look at it and know, oh, that's why they're doing it. They're coloring for the storytelling too. It's not just about making it look good.
Anybody involved in making comics whatsoever, it lets you know what you can do and what you can accomplish with color. Yeah. And also it's really helpful in working with a colorist, right? Because you guys have kind of a common language.
Yeah, at least you know enough. You know
enough to know when they've done something great, or to ask them, hey, can I ask you, why would you do this instead of that? And you're paying them, you can ask them that question at least. And also it's just another way to communicate with the talent. It's very cool.
Yeah. And so for me, when I'm looking at colorists' work, it's like I want to try and find if they've done color holds on the lines anywhere. If you don't know what that means, that's because I didn't either until I watched those videos. But that's really important in modern comic coloring. And so knowing that, okay, they know how to do color holds, they know how to use bounce light. It's not just local light for the colors. They're using bounce light. And are they coloring for the emotion and for the mood, or are they just coloring to make it look nice? And all of these things are important, and there's others too. But that channel is the place to go.
And that helps you when you're working with a colorist, so that you can think about what you want, because people don't know what's in our head. Thank God, right? But people don't know what's in our head, and we don't know what's in their head. So it's like they need to know what it is that you want.
Right.
Like what you're just saying, but are they just making it look nice? There's kind of nothing wrong with just making things look nice if that's what you're going for.
Sure.
Right. But they need to know what you're going for.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing is, if like, for example, like Kyle Ritter, he's an amazing colorist. He makes a point to color things. Like you'll notice he'll have really action packed scenes that will be colored in red, something like that. Or when there's and all of that sets a tone and it sets the mood. And again, you depending on what book you're doing, it's gonna depend on what kind of coloring you want. But yeah, being able to communicate with every single person you're hiring, even down to the letters, I've lettered a little bit myself, but it's not good. I know enough to know it's not good enough,
Well, it's the same thing with the lettering. It's the same
Yeah.
thing with the coloring and the other interior art. And
Yeah.
there's nothing, I think it's fantastic when people publish all their own work, like what Carl Rowe is doing on Death Sworn. What a freaking cool project.
Yeah.
And, he does everything himself down to the lettering. And some people are capable of that and they're good with that. But there's an amazing reward to being able to just collaborate and not be 100% competent in anything like me. I can't really fully write anything. I mean, maybe I could and it would be okay. I don't know, but maybe working with an editor, I don't know. But you get to work with the whole team and keep it organic. And then you really can, as long as you know what you want and you can speak the language of the other guys that are making choices, colorists, letterers, the artists, in my case too, even the writer, you get to compose a project, but also have kind of like the best influences from the whole creative team.
Mm.
That's why I love the process so much, is because I'm paying everyone, I get to kind of be in charge and we get to execute my freaking idea with all these really powerfully brilliant, creative people.
Yeah.
And I've been fortunate to work with some fantastic, like really super talented people, and some of them new and some of them more experienced people. And it's very educational, like the whole time.
Yeah.
And there may be a project too, Clint, that you're like, look, I'll hire a writer to work on this idea for me.
Yeah.
And you'll be part of composing the whole thing, like Von Klaus writes. Again, Von Klaus, but
Yeah.
he does write for other people,
Yeah.
and he really enjoys it. And there's another one of our guys I know who is open to writing for other people. The guy who does Iron Skies, Chris Rue.
Okay.
So I don't know if you'd be curious to work with
Yeah.
him or not, or if he's even available or not. But just kind of amazing.
Yeah. So and I got hired. I think the campaign's launching next week. I got hired to write a Silver Streak story. It's going to be one of those.
Oh, I didn't know. I thought you were
Yeah.
I didn't know. I thought you were publishing it maybe. So you're doing that with Chuck Dixon and
David Furr. And David Furr he's the one bankrolling the whole thing, so he's the project manager, producer, and he's also a writer. So he's got a story he's writing in it. But that's an example. But I've thought even, how Graveyard Shift did, John Malin put out that call for submissions and for people to do short stories, and he pays them and adds it. So he's got more to add to Graveyard Shift. I've thought about that. I think that's a great idea because it gives your readers more for their money, but it doesn't, it makes sense. It's a separate story. It doesn't have the same artist. It just helps you sort of make that book a little bit thicker, give them more. So I think it's a great idea.
It's very cool. It's very cool. Yeah. We'll have to talk more about that. It's great to see like different people contributing to different parts of it. And especially in the case of a couple like Cal, who did Shinobi Sasquatch, also wrote a story in Graveyard Shift, and Vaughn wrote one, and you see these guys out there, and it's also helpful for social media for the projects. And it's great because everybody gets kind of a chance to do different things. So did you like writing somebody else's work?
Yeah, it was a good experience. That was the first time I've ever been hired to write, so it was a little weird. But it was the weirdest part was that I've never, I've been writing comic scripts for years, but I've never written one that's based on a superhero. So this was my first superhero story. And so yeah, it was kind of nice. And my opinion is I could have been paid outright, but I said I'll take a lower page rate in order to have a piece of the profit. I always want to have that option. I know some people would rather not, but for me, I'm like, I can help promote it and stuff. So getting a little back end profit's nice. But yeah, it's been really fun because I don't have to do all of the really hard parts with publishing the book and producing it, running the campaign. That stuff is underrated with how difficult it is and how stressful it is. So
yeah, here's someone who's going to school us, I think, a little bit.
hey, there we go.
Hey,
Pete.
how's it going?
How you doing, our friend? My friend,
am,
your
Good, yeah.
I'm busy tonight packing up stuff, so I'm not going to be on camera, but
Okay.
I will converse for a little bit.
kind of you to join our. I planned this show, and your show was really a great show that we did together. But I've been really trying to spend time thinking of, I want to have entertaining shows and fun shows, and I want to have fun people and we can have some laughs. But at the same time, I want to try to produce some content that I know is really going to help other people who are either trying to make comics or, just trying to get ahead, whether it's in the creation process or it's like our situation. We just launched our first crowdfunding campaigns for comics, DOWNCAST and My College of the Dead. And I know that Clint learned a lot during the process. So we were just talking about what we've learned. And he and I had reviewed a few topics in advance. And one of the questions is a question that Clint really hasn't been successful on just yet. And honestly, I've got some great looking prototypes of my books, and my books are completely done, but we are revising the files to suit the printer. And I'm not great with file prep myself. So we were like, all right, well, the super amazing guru who is going to straighten us out a little bit is going to tell us, look, these are the principles, gentlemen, of preparing your files for the printer. You need to know what InDesign is, or whatever it is that you would like give your general wisdom about. Enlighten us. Just
Great. Who's coming in? Who's coming in to say all these things?
Well, I mean, the guy, to the extent that you resell printing and you deal with web presses as well as, an offset in another location. I mean, it's going to be you, man.
Oh man, I feel really bad then for the whole chat. Well,
we're all going to lose out.
It's either that or I'll tell another story, and we don't want that. So
what are the specific questions? Is there anything specific?
The specific question,
really,
all right. That's fair. Like, let's not. Okay, that's not.
It's a really wide topic.
Wide topic. So more focus. So let's assume that we're not going newsprint. Mm-hmm. Let's assume that we're preparing. We have a 52-page color graphic novel. Mm-hmm. We're going to print with a printer you're familiar with, API Productions. We're getting in. Let's maybe related a little bit to DOWNCAST. So we're getting in
it's
color
pages. A book called Cast Down.
Cast up and down. Well, it doesn't. It's a 40. It's in that realm of what we deal with as comics projects. It's a color book. We're getting in color files from the colorist. They look good. So the first question is there a general format that a printer is expecting us to deliver those beautiful files in? So what is the final format that we're delivering in the interior? And is it a PDF?
Yeah, if it's API, it's going to be a PDF that is it's complete already. It's a multi-page document PDF. And you can put that together with InDesign or Photoshop. There's an option there. You can set that up. It's pretty easy, pretty simple. But you want to make sure, obviously, you've got your bleeds on there for newsprint. It's a 1/4 inch on each side, but for most other books, it's 1/8 of an inch on each side.
So when you say 1/8 of an inch in each side, so let's.
So
say
yeah,
I've
so
got
if
my
you're
first 10 pages.
Yeah.
See, what I want to do is I want us to be able to yell at people. So meaning like, come on, Clint, you should be building your file already. You have color pages. The first 5 pages are lettered. Let's get those 5 pages in a such and such document. Let's make sure they already have the setup for bleed because we know we're going offset rather than newsprint is web, right?
Yes. Yep.
They're not printing on sheets of newsprint. Okay, good. Web means it's just on a big roll of paper, like a toilet bowl roll of paper, like a toilet paper, but it's newsprint. In any event, so if you know what the bleed is supposed to be, then you should have a document that's already set up in either Adobe Photoshop or what software would you use?
I
What-
use Photoshop a lot. It doesn't. You can use InDesign as well, but most printers they're just going to end up wanting PDF files. You should always talk, of course, to the printer to see what they prefer, but they try to keep it. They try to keep it as universal as possible. So even though you could do an InDesign file, you're usually going to end up sending that to the printer as some kind of a PDF.
So
I've had printers before that they take TIFFs or things like that, but most of the time it's a PDF.
and the PDF is kind of like the final format for the printer to say, aha, that's the final file. Everything is there in the PDF, and now I can print it.
Yep.
But to build up to that PDF, you've got to take these individual pages and stick them somewhere so that it can be an editable graphics thingy.
Yeah, well, the thing is, before you do that, you got to talk to the printer, and you got to make sure you have their ICC profile. So this way,
an ICC profile.
Yeah. That basically is what their color settings are like. This way, you can adjust your book accordingly, and the files won't print too saturated or not saturated enough. Color shifts may occur if you don't have the correct profile. You got to set up the dot gain and things like that correctly on the files as well. Otherwise, if your dot gain is off, you're either going to have ink that's bleeding and spreading too much, or ink that's not really, getting in the right places, and it'll look kind of sparse. So you want to really make sure you're talking.
So question number one, even before we build the file for the printer, is the ICC file, ICC profile, and all printers know what that is.
Yeah.
Clint, you got that one?
Yeah. So what I've been convinced of now is that I don't want to mess this up, so I'm going to hire somebody.
Yeah. No, but you know what?
Is that an acceptable route to go?
If you're going to hire Peter, it's fine. But anyone else, they may not follow these steps. So, like, they might skip a step. And then when I was in pre-calculus in high school, there was a kid named Chip. But for some reason, he liked to skip some steps in pre-calculus. And I'll never forget, the teacher called him Skip Step Louie, and she mocked him in front of everyone else a number of times. And I don't know why that always stuck with me. But you don't know if you're going to hire a Skip Step Louie. This is not that complicated. It's just that Peter's explaining it badly. No, only kidding. Peter's explaining it beautifully. Peter, I'm just being funny.
This would be, I think something like if I read up on it and looked at some steps or practice it a few times or something.
No. All Peter is saying is he's saying this to us. He's saying, Adam, love you. Clint, love you more. Send an email to API saying, hey, I just wanted to check with you in advance. Can you please send me the details on your ICC profile?
Yeah, it's easy.
Send that.
Yeah.
You just stay in communication with the printer. And the thing is, if you're working with a printer who goes, oh, well, I don't know what our color settings are, or I don't know what that is,
right,
you just run away screaming. Don't use that printer.
Yeah. So in my example, we have so Damien Penalba is the colorist, and he knew all this, and so he asked me for the color profile, and I said I don't even know what that is. Ooh, so I asked the printer, and they provided me with a document, and I turned around and I gave it to Damien, and he said perfect. So I that went well. But yeah, this is again, like I was saying before, I need to know the whole process to understand at least the language. And so, this is really good.
Yeah, because one of the most important parts too of the ICC profile is going to be total ink limit, which is basically saying how much can that paper hold in terms of ink before it saturates either through or it offsets to the other page. Now, this is a problem that we had early on with newsprint. Our very first printer that we only used for the first 4 books, they were all over the place with everything. It drove me up the wall. They said it was one thing, it obviously was another. I went against my better judgment and listened to them, and I didn't like what happened, and I got really upset about that, and we didn't use them anymore. The second printer was pretty good, but But as time went on, there were a bunch of different problems with them that it really didn't have much to do with the printing. The only problem I ever had with them with printing was offsetting, where generally black would offset to the other page. So you'd have a little bit of black from one page going on to the opposite side of the page. And this is usually because black is more composed of 4 colors as opposed to other kinds of colors. So you'd see that kind of thing show up more, and it's because of the drying time involved and different processes like that. But their paper couldn't hold the way they were printing the ink and everything else on there in the profile they gave us. It wasn't really correct because it couldn't hold as much ink as they were telling us it could. So with this printer now, we've adjusted everything, and all the books, the interiors have always printed great. But it's largely because we're staying within their ink limit. And the ink limit is it's CMYK. There's cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. And you want to, generally with newsprint, keep it 240 or less, meaning that all 4 of those inks, you'll never have a combination of them. And the scale goes from 1 to 100, or 0 to 100, I should say, where the total ink is over 240. Most pages that are premium paper stock, you can do 300 or more. Some of them that are really, really great paper stocks, you can even do the total limit of 400, which would be 100 on each CMYK. But with newsprint, if you did 400, it would bleed right through. In some cases, it might even shred the paper because of the bleed would be so bad.
Wow.
Yeah. So think of it as all the ink is it's liquid going onto the paper, and the paper absorbs it. So if you put too much liquid on any piece of paper, you're going to have the integrity of that paper is lost. So you can shred it, you can poke a hole through it, it doesn't dry. So you want to make sure, obviously, you're talking to your printer about that kind of stuff. On premium paper stocks, though, you generally don't have to worry about stuff like that. It's more for the uncoated stocks, and especially for newsprint.
So once you have the ICC profile, the next step is to
once your color stuff, everything is good to go. You want to make sure you're obviously sizing everything correct. So if Clint, what's the page size of your graphic novel?
It's going to be standard.
So she doesn't know. So 6 and 5. No, okay. 6 and 5/8, 10 and a quarter, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So you want to give an 1/8 inch bleed on all sides. If you've got bleed, I'm guessing there's bleed on the book. Is there?
Yeah,
okay.
There are.
Yeah, so you want to make sure
yeah.
So you want to make sure with bleed, and for people that don't know, obviously you guys probably know. I'm hoping you guys know. I know Adam definitely does, and I think Clint does too. Bleed is anytime the image goes past the trim, and this is mostly so that you get a nice clean image break there. You don't see any white part of the paper. You may sometimes it still happens, and it drives all of us up the wall when you still give the proper bleed, and the trim it shifted a little too much, and you still will get an image like
a little bit of white.
Yeah, and a little bit of white there. That's drives me up the wall with that.
But and the reason why stuff like that happens is there's the file prep part, but also keeping in mind with a typical 48 page comic book, you might have 3 pages that are 16 pages each, 8 pages on each side, that are then folded and stapled all together. So by the time they move those pages around a little bit, things can happen. But the higher quality the printer, the more careful they are about that. And Peter, that might be why, if you're doing a book that's more than 32 pages, particularly, say if you're doing 52 pages, I don't know, you might want to put it in InDesign, because does InDesign do a better job of accounting for gain?
Not necessarily. It does. If you're used to using the program, it'll help you a bit more, I guess, with setting up guides already there for you. But you can set up those same kind of guides in Photoshop and things like that.
Okay.
Would you suggest getting a physical proof edition first? I know, like you've said on some of your books, Peter, that you're used to how it works, and so you don't. But for somebody like me, where you're doing a campaign, is that the best idea?
I think you should always go with your gut in terms of, if you really think you need to see a physical proof, see if that's an option. Sometimes it's not really an option.
Yeah.
Like for us with the web press with newsprint books to get proof copies. It would
Cost
be
as much as it
so
would cost to
expensive.
print it.
Yeah, because most of that
Yeah.
cost, when you're printing web or offset, it's just them putting the machine on, getting everything set up, getting the plates in there, everything else. The paper is a minimal cost. And that even means too, if you're using higher end paper stock, the paper is always the cheapest cost of the whole entire process. So usually it's not really advisable. Sometimes they can print a pretty close CMYK digital proof if they've got that kind of press on hand. But I've never found them to be really 100% helpful getting a physical proof. I know some people like to do that sort of stuff, but
sometimes it'll help you see, for one thing, that you didn't leave any pages out or put them in the wrong sequence. Or especially if someone else is prepping it for you, or if you're doing it yourself, because sometimes we look at our own work, but we don't see like an obvious error. But having a friend having a couple of friends look at the PDF before it goes out probably will tell you just as much.
Yeah, and that's something I like a lot about API is that they'll make sure that things are right, and if things don't go right and they miss something, like we've had a problem one time when they printed a book, the cover stock wasn't the stock we ordered, and it didn't have the correct laminate on it, and the laminate started peeling up about a month or so later, and I told our contact Robert over there, and he made right with it. He's like, he offered either we can give you more books free of charge, and we'll just go back to press with it, and we'll own up to it, or we'll just give you a refund. We'll give you either a credit or a refund.
Wow.
And they were he's always been great about any kind of mess up. And when it comes to stuff like that too, with if a page isn't high enough resolution, or if a page, like let's say you send a 2-page spread and most people don't understand, and it happens too, even with us every now and then, because you do so many books, but that of course on the left side, it's always going to be an even number, like 2, 4, 6. And on the right side is always going to be an odd number, 3, 5, 7. So you want to have your spreads when you put them out there. You want to have it, make sure that it lines up correctly. Now, if you put it through with them, let's say, and the numbers don't really jive, they'll actually let us know. And this only happened one other time before. And they'll let us know, hey, this looks like it's a 2-page spread. You don't have the page really lining up here correctly. Is that intentional? And in the case that we had, it was intentional. It wasn't necessarily a spread. It looked like it was a spread. But they look out for you with stuff like that. So I've always liked working with them because of it.
Well, cool.
Yeah, it could be a lonely business being a one-man publisher. And to have somebody else looking out for you, it's just an amazing feeling. Like anybody who's not creating extra work for you, and God forbid they should make things a little bit easier, that's fantastic.
Yeah. I've really liked working with them. So I recommend them all the time.
API Productions, you just put them in Google and if you put comic book if it doesn't come up immediately or something else odd comes up in a Google search, you'll see who they are. Or you can hunt any of us down on Twitter and we'll connect you to them. And it was funny because the moment that Peter recommended them, I was just like, all right, they must be great people, because he's not recommending anyone who's not great people. You just kind of know that.
No.
Yeah, if they're going to give you, there's some printers they won't. They'll just go through with it. They'll be fine. They'll print whatever, but they won't really go above and beyond. And especially we've had problems too with printers where the whole entire job would be just lost, and it was 100% their fault. They did something different. They used a complete different paper stock. They didn't. Sometimes we've had printers that will adjust the color profile on our pages. And then they'll think that's okay because we wanted it, oh, didn't you want it to print this way instead? I said, no, we wanted it to print the way that we gave it to you, and now look what happened is that you put it through the press and it looks like garbage.
Are they taking responsibility?
And they don't take responsibility.
So
so I don't recommend them. I don't work with those kinds of people anymore. But these guys,
well, you have
API's always done great by us.
You're trying to produce good comics, but you're literally in business with everyone that you're publishing with, and they're trusting you with a lot of work that's very important to them. So they want to, like, I have the same sense that, like, you have a question about making a comic book, you ought to ask Peter. He's going to tell you how to execute what you're trying to do. So yeah, it's really a violation if they're going to change the work that creators give to you to put out. You're not just making greeting cards. It's creative expression, so it's got to be right. It's got to be consistent. Very, very interesting. All right, so it matters really to start off with the ICC profile. Also, you need to, by that point, understand when you're setting up your book to print, what paper you're going to print on, whether it's newsprint, and everybody recommends you check out what Peter's doing with his alternative printing service, because 50 cents a book for 500 books, color comics, it's kind of amazing if newsprint suits your project. And if not, Peter's recommended API Productions for offset. Peter, what about for digital? Does the ICC profile apply for digitally printed color?
Yeah, still yeah. It's not gonna. Digital is a weird beast, but it's still gonna apply in some way. I've noticed the biggest difference with digital is that with the black ink, you're gonna feel it's kind of raised, and that's generally because it's a 4-color black, and it's a very rich black, so it's going to be all 4 layers, ink on top of ink on top of ink, and the digital always kind of sits a bit raised on the paper. It doesn't really absorb into it. That's why when you hold up a digital printed book, a lot of the times the black ink will really be reflective. It'll be pretty shiny, whereas offset or web, it absorbs more into the paper, and you don't really get that same kind of shine and reflection there. But you should still always talk to them and see what's what.
It seems like a good test just to see like how good of a printer they probably are, because if they completely disregard the question, or like you said, don't even know what the heck you're talking about, they're not watching their colors. And a lot, it's interesting, but a lot of the quality of the color in black and white printing, digital, offset, web, whatever the process is, it does happen to be like, do they know how to use their equipment properly?
Yeah.
Right? Because they could just screw it up or just be careless about it and be like, yeah, we're just banging this out. We're banging this out.
Yeah, and that's the thing too with things like the printing partnership program, is that you're essentially just using the exact same paper stocks that we're using. And I get a lot of people who will say, "Oh, will you do a graphic novel? Will you do it manga size? Will you do it with premium paper stock?" And the thing is that we can, but we really won't with this program, because you're not going to get any of those savings. You're not piggybacking onto our print run at that point. You're setting up an entirely unique job.
Yeah, and guys, that one thing to understand, and I've bought a lot of printing from different printers in different situations before, and what Peter is being able to offer you, and I don't know how Peter's structured exactly, but if Peter is doing 4 or 5 comics a month for Alterna, he's getting a better price to do 4 or 5 comics at once. If he was to just be like, I'll send this one in on Monday, I'll send that one in next Thursday, or whenever I get around to that one. No, Peter gives a printer, I'm assuming, the most valuable work for the printer as possible. So in addition to that, Peter is prepping it theoretically, and Peter can tell me if I'm right or wrong, so that on a given day in a month, the printer is able to set up to do all of Peter's work. So the printer is going to know, like, all right, I have this work coming in from Peter roughly this day of the month, or maybe even exactly this day of the month, and I can do 4 or 5 comics. Plus, I might have some extra signatures, extra interiors, extra covers from the partnership program. And the printer appreciates being able to set up to do comics for Peter with that paper stock, with that format, with that pre-press. I'm assuming there isn't multiple formats of pre-press coming. Who would allow that? Because the thing is we want it to be as smooth as possible. With newsprint in particular, a newspaper might have been, back in the day, 200 pages or something like that. So that might be in multiple 16-page signatures or 32-page signatures, 8 sheets of whatever. The point is a whole lot of the same kind of work at once. And that really helps a printer out. So for that kind of a printer, once they've gotten the presses running, and they're just going to add like an extra 16 or an extra like 2 sheets of 16 pages so that Peter can get you your 500 run or your 1,000 run comic. It's much easier for them than dealing with all the customer service and the setup and the scheduling and all that other stuff. So you're helping
exactly.
you're helping Alterna, you're helping yourself, and you're helping the independent comics community when you partner up with someone to produce comics like this. So Peter is really doing this as a service to the community, but also as a core strength of Alterna. Even if it's not incredibly profitable, it keeps a good relationship with the printer. The printer knows you respect them, the way you're delivering the work, and that you're going to be giving them some significant work. And I'm sure occasionally Peter needs a favor, and he can ask a favor of the printer, and it's good for the relationship to have that work come in a common way, the same way. I mean, I'd love to have Peter printing College of the Dead for me. It's not the format that way, at least not yet. But because Peter is Peter, I'm definitely thinking about like, well, how would I break my book up for newsprint? And what formats would we do it? And the thing is, I'd love to talk about it with Peter. We can even talk about it right now, but Peter is so freaking organized that I can easily have 99% of the conversation with myself by just going to the Alterna Comics website and looking on the printing partnership program.
Yes, yeah, and that's the thing.
It's a little lonely, to be honest. It's a little lonely. It's more fun to talk about the work, but it's also time consuming. And the truth of it is, if we can kind of figure out how to work together in complementary ways, also, this wasn't the purpose of the conversation, but it is one of the things I learned more was about distribution and other distribution opportunities since I published my first comic. And Peter is now going to be launching Alterna Distribution, which is for sales to comic book stores. But it's also, as we learned on, I don't know if you discussed this on other shows or not, I hope people start to become familiar with this, as Peter is offering you access to sell your independent comics direct to consumers as well. And that's very lucrative potentially, for us as publishers, because maybe comic book stores will buy 30 or 40 of our comics or something like that, maybe more, maybe less. But Peter has a great business selling Alterna comics direct to consumers, and we're going to theoretically have access to Peter's customers as well by working through Alterna.
Yeah, and everybody brings in their audience too with it, which is great.
Yeah, we're all contributing our audience as long as we all feed into the system. So not everybody may want to do it, but if you want to be in business with Peter, and a lot of people do, of course, not everybody is, but a lot of people seek him out to want to work with him. Look at his website, look at things he's doing, subscribe to his YouTube channel. Peter, what is your YouTube channel, by the way?
It's nice and easy. It's just at Alterna Comics.
Okay, at Alterna Comics. So check out his YouTube channel and watch out for when he jumps on. And then we'd love to think of other specific shows that we could do together. Do we have any other pre-press questions we want to bother Peter with?
I don't think so.
You harassed him a lot. I like it.
Yeah. It's always good talking to Peter. I do have to get off here pretty soon. I got maybe 2 minutes left.
Yeah, man. All right, let me see. Yeah. Anything else? All right, so let's ask this final question of you, Clint. The main things that you learned for your next campaign. So just the main, 2 things, maybe 3 ideally, whatever, that you're going to do differently because of your first campaign.
Yeah, I think I still feel like I'm still learning. I did some things I like with this campaign. Something that I wish or that I want to do differently is not run out of the higher like $50 tier. I didn't have enough of those and I ran out months ago. And so that would be one thing, is just provide. I've found that I have a lot of pretty devoted fans that want to support. And so I was really concerned about just making the book affordable and making it still work for me. And I think I did that, but finding, I guess, a little something for everybody. So people that still want to support more have them be rewarded for that. So that would be one thing.
It's a really good point.
2 would be definitely the production timeline. And that was a learning process at the beginning. I feel like I've got it under control now, which is great. But yeah, from the next one is going to be right off the bat, like I'll have that down. So, and then, I'll just keep looking at the really good campaigns that I like. I still feel like there's a lot to learn.
That's excellent. For me, it was really learning to have my promotion house in order as much as possible when I launch. Knowing like, all right, I'm going to be on these channels. I've already worked it out with those people. Here's where it's a good fit for me to promote, where it's not a good fit. Any inspiration for, all right, just a quick question that Dora McCon blog asked, any inspiration for your book from Savage Worlds East Texas University? No, I hadn't heard of it, but that is a good question. The campus that we use is not named in the College of the Dead book, but it's the campus that Stefan taught at in Massachusetts somewhere. And we didn't ask their permission, and we just thought it'd be fun to not name it. But that's the answer to that. And yeah, also, Clint, in terms of the tiers and understanding the tiers, the main thing for me is really understanding, like, as well, like, you want all the tiers to be affordable, but at the same time, there are people that do want to support us at higher levels. So I have to think that through as well. More than one cover version is something people seem to really want. And we're working on a few different cover versions for College of the Dead #2. And also really realizing that, whatever things cost us to make, it's not the same thing as perceived value for the customer. So the customer, it's worth it to some people to be drawn into a book. And it's worth it for some people to own the original art and things like that. It's something that they want. And if they want it, it only helps us to be able to provide it as long as it seems like it's fair. And if we look at what other people are doing on campaigns, we can learn a lot too. Yeah. We can definitely learn a lot more. I would love to have a conversation with Peter too sometime about what he's learned in publishing because it's immense. So we'd have to just pick the most fun category and start with that one when Peter has time. But Clint, I really appreciate you taking the time and getting with me on the show. And Peter, so great of you to just jump in there and get us straight a little bit on files. It all starts with the ICC profile, and it goes on from there. And we promise we'll do better next time on being better on our pre-press. How's that?
Well, it's a learning process, right? So that's all. And I think Clint knows what he's doing, and he's a good guy. I'm always am willing to give Clint some advice whenever he asks.
Thanks. Appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem.
Can I have advice too when I ask Peter?
Yeah. Again, as long as, and I spoke
Sometimes
with Clint about this too.
Yeah.
I don't mind giving advice, but some people, they give really broad questions. And that's when I'm like, I don't know how to answer this.
Well, that's what I did that to you, and then you straightened me out.
But some people, they don't.
But yeah, Peter was getting a little overwhelmed, but we got specific with the ICC thing, and then Clint was like, "Hey, man, I think I'm going to hire someone." We're like, "Well, no, don't go that direction. You can hire people, but then it's fine. But they're not. We just got to know what everybody's doing and understand the basics of the process. And it's okay to not understand all of the process, especially when you have somebody like Peter who can ask you about his details and." I give you my 2 cents on production management and breaking up work with different contributors. And then at the end of the day, everybody's making better books and more successful, and we're taking care of our fans. All right, guys, we'll have a terrific night. Peter, thanks again for this extra surprise help at the end. And we really appreciate you guys. Guys, definitely check out DOWNCAST on Indiegogo. If you haven't backed it already, you should be backing it. It's going to be a terrific book, and it's going to be shipping. I think I decided the last week of October. That's when I want it to ship.
Yeah, I don't want to make any promises. The campaign says January.
Okay,
but so we are ahead of schedule though, and things are looking good. So
awesome. And we just solved all your pre-press problems you were going to have in October. They're not going to happen anymore. And check out College of the Dead. I love my book. It's completely done. Just dealing with some of the pre-press issues, to be honest with you. It's black and white. Can you imagine that? It's almost ready to go, and we should be shipping actually the first week of October next month. So we are incredibly over the moon excited about it. All right, guys. Thanks again so much. Thanks to everybody in the chat. We really appreciate you. And everybody have a terrific night and be safe.
Awesome. Bye.
Have a good one. Thanks a lot.